welcome to Crafting a Revolution, the podcast. My name is Katie Freeman, and I'm one of your hosts. Every week, we bring you interviews with female identifying and non-binary makers of all kinds from all over the world. Today's guest is Uruba Slaughter, who is an abstract artist. She is not currently full-time abstract artist, though that is her kind of end goal in mind. And it was great getting to chat with Uruba and find out about what got her started into making abstract art and learning about her process for making and how to get into gallery spaces and shows. So really just overall great topics, and talking about pricing too, which I think is always really valuable information to learn how others price their work to sell. So I know that many of you will pick up some just great tips from this interview, as well as enjoy her story just as much as I did. Before I hop into the conversation with Uruba, I want to give a big shout out and thanks to the patrons over on Patreon. So thank you so much, Lee at Lee Runyon, Annette 513 Woodworks, Katie Thompson, Women of Woodworking, Kevin, Lefty's Woodshop, Christy, Twisted Twine, Jeremy Speece, Sammy, Go Sammy Lee, Rachel, Moody Makes, Bonnie, Toolmom Bonnie, toolmomstore.com, Laura, Oakley Soap Company, Brandy, Studio Obey, Lee, The Rainbow Carver, Ellen, Little Bear Furniture, and Ethan Carter Designs. Thank you all so very much for your continued and ongoing support of the podcast on a monthly basis. I really appreciate it. We appreciate it with the podcast. If you would like to help in an ongoing monthly manner, just head on over to patreon.com/crafting-a-revolution. If you would like to do more of an infrequent donation or a one-time donation, follow along with the podcast over on Instagram at Crafting a Revolution. Check out the link in the bio there, and it gives you an option for making a one-time donation. And thank you in advance for all of that. It is greatly appreciated and helps keep the lights on, if you will, for the podcast. All right, without further ado, let's head on into the conversation with Uruba Slaughter. All right, okay. Well, I do like to start by asking my guests to introduce themselves. Would you do that for me?
Sure. Good morning. I am Uruba Slaughter, abstract artist.
Okay. Can you define, when you say abstract artist, can you deepen that a little bit? Because I think there's like a broad array of things that fall into that category.
Okay. So I create original abstract paintings. My abstract paintings consist of a custom texture that I create myself. And my creations, they never start with a blueprint. They never start with a thought. They generally, I absolutely just choose colors and just go from there.
I love that. That sounds like my kind of creating, actually. Well, I want to take a step back and ask kind of a broader question and say, what is Uruba's story from like baby Uruba? Like, where were you born to like, how did you get into making abstract art?
Okay. I was born in New York City, Harlem Hospital. My family ventured from New York to Connecticut to Atlanta, and I've raised my family in Atlanta, and now we transitioned to St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay. You're not too far from me. I'm in Iowa, so like okay. I consider St. Louis still like Midwest-ish.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I've been to Iowa a few times.
Okay, and there's not much to see there. So
yeah, my daughter at Drake University.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's like our biggest metropolis is Des Moines.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. Like there's not much to see. It's cornfields, cows and pigs. That's about it in the state of
Sure.
Iowa.
And it's interesting enough that you say that because you asked how I started with creating. And I actually didn't start creating seriously until after my youngest went to college. So I didn't want me being an artist to interfere with my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to be distracted from being a part of my family.
Mm-hmm.
So I started creating when we took my youngest to school.
Okay.
So, yeah.
What I'm assuming though that you've had other forms of creativity before that, maybe not like as direct as painting, but I'm sure that it's kind of escaped along the way.
I think a little bit of everything that I've done in my life has had a touch of creativity to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like being a cosmetologist, that's pretty creative.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've dibbled and dabbled with some paintings, but not on the level where I am now. Mm-hmm. And what I create now totally didn't start until 2017.
Okay.
So it's pretty new for me.
Yeah, it's still pretty new. Yeah, that's when I started my woodworking business, was 2017. So nice. So we're about the same. Our businesses are heading off to kindergarten, and they're 5 years old. So
yeah,
we're entering the new stage of.
That's awesome! Congratulations!
Thank you. So why, did you always have this idea of wanting to paint?
Not on the level where I am now. Okay. I never thought that. I can't say. Well, I never thought it would make me this far. I've never considered myself thinking. I never thought that I would be like a professional artist. Mm-hmm. That was new. Dibbling and dabbling, creating a couple of pieces for a home or something of that nature. That was my thought process initially. I loved creating, but I just never. I guess I never thought I could do what I'm doing now. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that skill was there. I didn't know that talent was there. Mm-hmm. So.
Did you grow up with any artists, in your family or in your community?
So, like my mom, she would sketch, and I had a couple of brothers that could draw as well, but they weren't. It wasn't something that they cultivated.
Yeah.
Something that they just did their time.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So once you took the youngest off to school, and you what made you decide to jump in at that point?
Because at that point I had an empty nest. An empty nest. And then I was actually diagnosed with a brain aneurysm. Okay. And so I was looking at something that I could do, that created some stillness and some peace, relaxing that I could do. And of course, painting did that. I do work. I work for a hospital, so I dealt with patients all day. That's a different level of stress, And so that was a consistent stress, Mm-hmm. And so my plan was just to use painting as that outlet, mm-hmm. And it worked. And it's still working.
Good. Are you still doing both then? Are you still painting and then working? Okay, at the hospital?
Yeah.
Ooh, it's been a stressful couple of years. So I'll just say thank you for your service in healthcare. To me, those are the heroes. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. At this point, I don't have face-to-face contact with patients anymore. Mm-hmm. most of the work that I take care, it's on the phone.
Okay.
I'm actually working from home. I'm not in the office anymore. So
Which that comes with its own level of pros and cons working from home.
absolutely.
I mean, the commute is nothing, which is nice, but
Right.
but beyond that,
Yeah.
it can be tough. Do you think that? Do you feel like creating your art has allowed you to create space within your home that's like gives you relief from the, once we bring work home, sometimes it's hard to leave like work.
Um, so yes, because just as we have to allocate, we allocate time to go to work and clock in and clock out.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a passion that's outside of your job, you have to delegate that time as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to put as much of my time, effort, and energy into my passion
Mm-hmm.
that I do for the hospital. So yeah, it's definitely separate. There,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even work and do art in the same area of my house.
How did you, so once you decided to like, jump into it, empty nester type thing, like how'd you learn the skills, or have you always kind of had the like just natural ability?
So I think, well, the pieces that I created before I actually totally engulfed myself in it, I always did abstract art, but the level that I'm on now is totally different. It's much deeper. It's much more structured. Um, Before I didn't use texture and stuff like that. And so when I started back, I initially started back where I left off and just creating abstract paintings.
Mm-hmm.
And they were nice, but that's not what I wanted for myself. So I literally created the technique that I have now. So that was a learning process for me. Mm-hmm. So as far as the abstract aspect of it, that was something that I've always done.
Okay.
But the texture and things of that nature and my technique that I use now definitely evolved since I started back painting.
Mm-hmm. What was it about texture that called to you?
It allows a totally different, it allows a total different story to be told. Mm-hmm. One, two, I just wanted to be different. It's a lot of people doing abstract art. I didn't want to be a portrait artist. I didn't want to be a sketch artist. So I had to create an abstract painting that I was just as intrigued with as anyone else. Mm-hmm. I don't know, and it's just different. I think when you look at my work, the average person who knows me as an artist and see my work, they can generally tell if it was hanging on a wall in a gallery and they walked in and all they could say, oh, that's a Uruba Slaughter's piece. Mm-hmm. And that's my goal.
Okay.
To set myself apart as an artist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't do abstract art, but I guess I do in a way, but in the medium of wood.
Sure.
And it's probably been a couple of years now that I started adding texture to my pieces. I saw, somebody else on social media kind of playing around with texture. And I'm like, oh, that just like set the level to a whole, set things to a whole new level. And I guess I always look at it as like I'm trying to create pieces that are more than just like something to look at, but as an experience for somebody else. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, yeah, that extra dimension just brings them in a different way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely a conversation piece.
Yep, exactly. When did you go from like creating kind of for yourself to, you know, getting pieces put in galleries?
So my very first, so literally I started creating the latter part, say of 2016, after taking my daughter to college or whatever. By January 2017, and I usually say that's when I started because that was the first time I had a piece in a gallery.
Okay.
So in January of 2017, I had started transitioning into creating textured work. And I actually had my first piece go in a gallery that month.
Okay. What can you tell me more about the process of doing that? I mean, did you like apply? Were you like banging on gallery doors? How did that whole thing come about?
So honestly, the very first time I learned how to get my work into a gallery was answering an art call, an artist call. Okay. And I had no idea what that was, but my oldest daughter introduced me to that. She actually sent me an art call and told me to fill it out. And I was like, well, what is this? Just read up on it. And that's honestly how I started, by answering artist calls and things of that nature. And just learning that process by different artists that I met along the way. And, being a part of artist groups and stuff like that. So, yeah. And it's a thing.
Yeah.
It's definitely a thing.
Yeah.
And after a while, then I've started receiving phone calls and stuff like that from other galleries asking me to be a part of a show or to get work into their galleries and stuff like that. So it's a give and take, it happens both ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've never been, I guess I've never been brave enough. Maybe I need to wait for my kids to get old enough to push me into to doing it, to answering the calls. Like I stalk the call for artists, but I've never been brave enough to actually apply. I guess it's just something to me. I think that, at least personally, I get scared by this idea that somebody else is judging and can deem my work not worthy enough to.
Well, there are so many different type of artist calls. It could just be an artist call for something simple. They want the art call to be because of the color yellow, anything that's relevant to the color yellow. So in those cases, it's not necessarily a competition. They're not judging. It's just they have a gallery and they have a show with all yellow paintings. Those are one of the easier ones, and I think that's a great place to start because no one's judging you, but you learn a lot. Putting yourself in those situations as a new artist, it allows you to go through that process, understand that process, and put a lot of fears that you have about that process at bay, because your only expectation is to show this piece of art that I submitted to this art call.
True.
And then, honestly, even with that first art call that I answered, I had gotten to a portion of filling out the application for it, and it asked my age. And when I came across that question, I left it there for a couple of days. I did. I was like, yeah, no, I'm not doing this. I'm too old for this.
So did you feel that? Did you really feel that way? Like, did you feel like being an artist is a young person's game? Or?
No, I don't think it wasn't about being an artist. It was, I think it was more so about that art call. Because what was the purpose of them asking my age? You know what I mean? And so, again, this was all new to me. I had never
Yep.
shown my work. I had never had and this was a relatively large art show.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was very intimidated initially.
What was it like walking into that space for the art show, and like that first time walking in and seeing your piece?
It was amazing. It was amazing. Just the entire experience was amazing. And I say that because I was nervous. I was apprehensive about answering that art call. Mm-hmm. And that particular art show put me in a different headspace because they actually used some of my work to promote the show so it was on the local news, which was amazing for me. Definitely scary because here I am creating abstract art. And we know how some people think about abstract art.
Right.
Right. People underestimate abstract art. And, it's like, well, it just looks like a 5-year-old scribbled on a canvas, So you do have people who feel that about abstract art. So here I am as a new artist who's created her own technique.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I was nervous.
Makes complete sense to me. I'd be nervous too.
But it was amazing. It was definitely an amazing experience for me.
Did you call yourself an artist before the show?
No. I didn't. I don't even think that I was even considering myself an artist in the midst of the show. These are some works that I created, but I don't think I ever addressed myself as an artist.
Okay.
Even after I actually saw my first piece at that show.
Which is always a good feeling. Was it somebody that doesn't know you? Because to me, that's always the key.
It was someone I did not know. Someone I did not know. And it came, and I didn't even remember seeing that person looking at my art. But the art show was over, and we were loading up the car, and she ran out. She's like, "Oh my gosh, I thought I missed you." She's like, "I saw your work, the piece when she first came in, but she didn't want to carry it around the show." Mm-hmm. So we were leaving, and she purchased it. It was pretty awesome. I was like, "Wow,
yeah,
that takes you on to a different mental level." Mm-hmm. Definitely.
What was the theme of that first show?
It actually, it didn't have a theme.
Okay.
It didn't have a theme. That's always good for, especially how I create. It's always themeless shows for me I love themeless shows because they don't restrict you.
Right.
So yeah, it didn't have, because it had quite a few different art. It was a really big show.
Okay.
The event space was 2 level, and it was a lot of different artists there, and every medium. So it was.
Was this in St. Louis or was it in Atlanta?
It was in St. Louis.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you end up creating? I know. So, like you said briefly at the start, that you kind of like you grab the colors and you just kind of go. Mm-hmm. Find yourself as you're making the piece to, like, are you thinking about something like in general as you're making it, that like ends up coming through?
So I can't say yes to that.
Okay.
And I think my process is difficult for even myself sometimes to understand, and happens to transcribe to the canvas. Because no, I don't, it's never a time where I'm creating and I'm thinking about, let's hypothetically say, some roses, and I end up painting a rose or something like that. So no, I could be thinking about a plethora of different things. Of course, I listen to music while I'm creating, and I'm a bourbon connoisseur. So it sometimes it could be not necessarily what I'm thinking about, but it could be a combination of those two things and what mood they put me in at that moment. But it's still an unintentional transition from my feelings or my vibe to the canvas.
Hey makers, today's episode is sponsored in part by toolmomstore.com. At toolmomstore.com, you can find any and all tool-based merchandise for all genders, all sizes. They've got mugs, they've got shirts, all kinds of cool stuff. I have one of the shirts myself that has the hashtag woodworkher on it. And I also have a couple of the mugs that define what and who is a tool chick. So super excited with the merchandise that I have. I know that you will be satisfied as well. And also great discount for those of you who listen to the podcast. At checkout, if you enter the code MAKERMOM, you will get a 20% discount off any of the merchandise that you buy. So that's just toolmomstore.com. All right, let's head back into the action. And I think I think what I was trying to ask more so is not necessarily like thinking of an object that would come through, but thinking of just a feeling, whether it's like stuff going on in like personal life or world at large that like just ends up kind of going through you into the canvas type thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's almost like being in a trance or something like that, and whatever happens. Yeah, I think that's the best way that I can describe it.
Yeah. I definitely feel the same in my process when I'm carving wood, because I've tried to aim for like a specific like resemblance to an object or something like that, and that just failed, and I found it frustrating and it didn't work. But if I like just took to a piece of like, okay, I have all of this emotion and let's just see where it takes me. And I get very transitive. I call it my meditation. That is my meditation. But that, and then it just ends up, the piece that comes out is way better. Like sometimes when it's like coming out of that trance, it's like, absolutely, wow, I made that. Like I made that. Yeah. I wasn't expecting that type thing.
Yeah, I like to call it a purge. It's gone now on that canvas. Yeah. Yep. So I totally agree. I like that better. I think I've created like masks on canvases. Those, of course, are intentional. I think that's the most intentional work that I do. I set out to paint a skyline. I created a skyline. And it took me forever to do it because it was an intentional piece.
Yeah.
And I was really bored creating that skyline, so it took me longer to do just a simple skyline. It was on a nice size canvas. But it took me much longer to create that skyline than it would be for me to, start one of my pieces from beginning to end. So yeah, I'm not.
Well, I think maybe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, maybe what I hear you saying is like something like a skyline, there's not emotion there. Like it's like looking at a skyline can evoke emotion, right? Depending on how you feel about like that space that you're looking at, but the actual skyline itself is not something that like you would create from a
Right.
mood.
Right.
That's just
Absolutely.
not. So I can see why that would be like a harder project to work on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Have you seen or have you felt a change in your work um, over the last, couple years in the, I will call it the craziness around our country? um, have you felt that come through in your work at all?
I think that yeah, you can see some of the you can see an emotion shift in
Mm-hmm.
the my work. You can see that um, not just because of the times that's going on, or or because of the pandemic. It could
Mm-hmm.
just could be anything, um, but definitely I can see a emotional change in my work. I
Mm-hmm.
can't say if it's from being stuck in the house all the time or not, but I think if I really sat down and thought about it, I could probably say, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah.
Do you think those, especially those closest to you, see it too?
I would say yes, definitely. They would
Yeah.
probably it would probably be more obvious to them than it would be to me.
Mm, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
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 Do you hope to get to a point to be a full-time artist?
Absolutely. That's my number one goal at this point in my life.
Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely.
how
Yes.
how are you, I guess, sometimes on the podcast I like to ask more like nuts and bolts type questions. So this is going to be probably one of those in the how are you like striving to do that? Like are you working to be in more shows or like how are you trying to I guess build it up as a
Sure.
what people don't understand a lot of times when you especially as a kid want to be an artist is that it's a business also. It's
Sure.
not just the creation part of it. So how are you kind of working on building that up?
So most importantly, in order to be a full-time artist that can actually survive,
Mhm.
um, you have to pretty much get yourself out there to be known as an artist.
Mhm.
And so, yes, doing more art shows, um, going from different states to, trying to transition into being international.
Mhm.
Those are the things that will allow me to be a full-time artist, and so that's my focus. It could be art shows, it could be um, artist residencies,
Mhm.
um, just things of that nature. As far as the business aspect of it, of being an artist, that was one of the things I focused on mostly when I started,
Mhm.
is learning the business aspect, learning what it actually meant to be an artist, um, do's, don'ts. What do I need to transition into that phase as
Mhm.
being a artist? Being a successful artist. Um, what type of artist do you want to be? Do you want to be an artist that's just well known? Do you want to be an artist that can survive on your creation?
Right.
It's a lot of things that you have to dissect in order to make it happen.
Mhm.
And that's my always my mindset. That's always my mindset. I
Mhm.
need to continue to create and figure out a way how I'm going to get from here to here. And every year, I make sure I have a significant amount of events. Um, I had a solo show in July in Atlanta, and that was my very first solo show out of state. And so I see me doing a lot of different shows like that this year. maybe in Atlanta and some other places, but definitely as many different places as I possibly can.
Mhm.
You know.
Well, congrats on your first solo show out of the state.
Oh, thank you so much.
um,
Thank you.
do you think, like, do you have any galleries that represent you as well? Like, I've seen your website, so I know you're selling pieces like on your website and stuff, but are there galleries you have things kind of in all the time as well?
I have some work in that gallery in Atlanta that I had that I did that show with. I have some work that's going up in another gallery in Atlanta. They're waiting. It's a brand new gallery, so it's in Rochester, Georgia, and they're doing a build out now. So I have work there to go up on those walls. But just a gallery where my work is always the pandemic. When the pandemic started and the galleries closed, I collected all of that work where I had work always in a specific gallery here in Georgia. I mean, in St. Louis. So I would say no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you had success with doing it like yourself online?
I've had the majority of success.
Okay.
Doing it that way.
Mm-hmm.
I did very well at the show that I had in Atlanta. I did very, very well. I would say, yeah. So that particular show, monetarily, I made the most money.
Mm.
But when we talk about how many pieces that I've sold, it's been from my work being on my website or social media and stuff like that, people reaching out to me and selling it that way as opposed to it being in a gallery. And yeah.
So I don't know how comfortable you are talking about money, but I do like to ask people, like, how do you figure out how to price your work? Because that's always a thing of like, how much do I charge for this thing I just made?
And I don't have a problem discussing it at all. So I always start off as, when I first started pricing work, I used a kind of grid, if you will. So I would take, it was based on the size of a painting, the size of a painting. So I would, let's just use some random numbers. Like, so if I had a 24 by 24, I would say I started that at $100. Okay. And then if it was a 24 by 24 gallery wrap canvas, or a 24 by 24 museum wrap canvas, or just a regular 1-inch canvas. So those three, even though they're the same size, they definitely have a different price point. Because the price of those canvases, they change.
Right.
So then I take into consideration, when after I create a piece, how much texture, how much work, how much paint, how much time that I put into each of those pieces. And that'll add or take away from the price of a piece as well.
Okay.
So I have a let's say a 24 by 48 painting. I can have three different ones, and they could be on those 3 different canvas options. And the base would probably start at, let's say, $1,000, but all of those different things are factor in as to how much that bottom line will be. So that's how I do mine now. So definitely the canvas, how much paint is used. I use a lot of paint, texture, how much time. Yeah, so
Okay. How long did it take you to like figure out your formula?
So because when I started doing art shows,
Mm-hmm.
figure it out really quickly. It's because I had a curator say to me that I did a big step by putting myself out there.
Mm-hmm.
And when I walked in there with my work, I didn't have that plan in place. I had no idea. And he said, now the hard part. And so I was like, oh, well, what could that be? He said, you have to price it. I was like, oh. So the paper, so I'm looking at it, they asked for the price. So I wrote a price in it down on the paper. And he looked at it and he slid it back to me and said, no, that's way too low. So yeah, there was a time where I was pricing my work way too low, and it would be some older, more seasoned artists who would tell me, that's ridiculous. Look at your work. There's no reason why that should be that low. I've had, and it could be like in the midst of a show, and it would be just an older, more experienced artist looking at my work and be like, yep, he was like, my work is nowhere near as detailed as yours. I just sold a painting that size for $3,000, and I may have had it listed for like $1,000 or something like that, And so that was a lesson in itself. But I also had to, just pricing it, you can put a price point on it, but you got to be able to stand on that price as well.
Right.
You have to be comfortable. You have to first understand that it's worth it. You're worth that price that you gave it. And then sticking to it.
I'm gonna say, I imagine people try to haggle.
No.
No. Good.
No, I think more so with anything is when you do art shows, and it was a problem that I had, you have an audience, you have an audience that you have in mind, but you're not going to always, that's not going to be the first people you show to, or the first demographic you show to. And so with that being said, I used to fluctuate my prices based on the demographics of where I was showing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a couple of things that we have to take into consideration with that. You have art lovers, and art connoisseurs, if they have been in it longer than you, then they already know what to expect as far as prices are concerned, especially good art. And your prices is not gonna, your prices aren't gonna, they're not going to intimidate that person.
Mm-hmm.
You being intimidated, you are adjusting your prices. Now I used to do that like all the time. I don't anymore.
Okay.
I don't do that anymore. It is what it is. If I have a promotion and you get a discount from that promotion, that's your discount. That's discount. But other than my prices, I do not fluctuate my prices any longer. And I think that, yes, am I comfortable with doing that? Probably, because I have a full-time job.
Right.
So my art sales don't make or break me.
Gotcha. It's not, so what I think you're saying is like, you're comfortable with it's that price, and if I don't sell a piece in that show because it's not the audience, the demographic that is comfortable with paying that price, then that's okay.
Yes, that is okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because our art show does more than put you in a position where you can sell art.
Right.
It teaches you a lot of things about being an artist. It helps get you recognition, and that's the most important thing, especially if you are a new artist. Yes, it's amazing to sell art, but it's just like everything else. You have to put yourself in a position and actually know what you're doing to increase your levels. Art shows, yeah, it's good. Like I said, it's nice to sell, but after a while, some of my earlier shows, that wasn't my focus. You know, I'm gonna do this art show, even if like I did an art show where it was a big art show and it was called Conceptions. And so what Conceptions would do is they would have this big art show, and it would be a slew of artists. Okay, they didn't charge you to be a part of this show, but you had to sell 10 tickets. So that was like $300. Okay, and I would just buy all the tickets. I bought out, you know what? If I sell one painting, I would have made that $300 back.
Right.
But most importantly, I'm looking at all of the people my work is going to be in front of, you know? And so that's how I think, you know? So, yeah.
Did it take you time to feel confident that your work was worth the prices, you were putting on it?
Absolutely. After I figured out how to price them,
right.
I had that formula. I broke the formula down, and when you look at that, take all those things into consideration, and you look at the final price, you're like, "Oh, that's kind of high." Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I work on a large scale, so I really don't do smaller paintings anymore. Yeah. Like that painting behind me, that's a 60 by 48. That's tall.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I needless to say, I took 2 paintings to Atlanta that size, and I had to price them. That was a whole different. It's a whole different beast. Because those were the first on that size scale. The ones that I created for that art show in Atlanta was the first ones I did that large.
That's a lot of canvas to cover.
Yes. I had already sold pieces smaller than that, nowhere near that size, like for $3,000 or $4,000. So I had to figure that out. And guess what? I priced it. Is what it is.
It is what, yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah. Do you have a hard time at all? Because this is where I also, again, I haven't had the courage to fully apply to, a call for artists, but my concern is sometimes like if I can create enough work in the time that there is, because I don't generally have just like a bunch of pieces like lying around ready to go. So is that ever a concern?
Not for me. No.
Okay.
Because it's one thing that I've learned, and it goes back to what I was saying, that you have to put just as much time and effort into yourself as you do for someone else. So when you're working a 9 to 5, you are Johnny on the spot for that job. And that's that's just somewhere you do the work and you're making them.
Right.
Okay. You have to put that much energy into yourself. So with me, even with all the work that I have now, I have work hanging in quite a few places. And so the work that usually it looks like I don't have any work created, but I have work in a lot of different places. And sometimes I'm like, gosh, where's all my work? But it's all out. hanging on other places. But one of the biggest things that I do, and I have a lot of artist friends who have the same concern as you, and there should never be a time where you don't have enough work. If someone calls you and say, hey, I have this art show going, do you want to be a part? Or can you be a part? And you like, well, I don't have enough time to create enough work. You should never put yourself in that position. I create every Friday. Every Friday, I'm painting. If I have an event on a Friday, I attend that event. And if it's late, or, maybe had a couple of too many drinks, I still do something. Still do something. If I'm starting a new piece, I might merely just unwrap the canvas, put my signature and stuff on the back of it like I normally do. But I did something to start that process. And as an artist, and some people might not feel that way, but I feel you should always have work, always be creating,
Yeah.
And I think with like I said, some of my artist friends, I've seen them not be able to do shows because they didn't have any work, or them accept a show to do and they had to hustle and create work. And it's a mess. And so I don't ever put myself in that position. Now, I do create work and I consistently create work, but if I had a show to do, I will always create a new piece to go to add in that show. So I might have pieces that I already have. And then, or I'll create one or two pieces, new pieces to take that no one's ever seen. So I'll create work and I won't post it on social media because I want this to be a new piece for that particular show.
Gotcha. It's coming actually right on time, as in our time being pretty much up. And so I want to give you a chance to let people know like how they can find your work and see what you're up to.
Sure. So my website is abstractslover.com. You can find my work there. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is abstractslover. I think those two are the most important places. Even if you Google Uruba Slaughter, you can find a lot of stuff there as well.
Okay. And I'll include the links to both of those in the show notes for the episode to make it easier for people to find them. Thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Really
absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so again, that was Uruba Slaughter. I will include the links on how you can follow along with her and see her available works in the show notes for today's episode. The best places to find those is check the description for the episode on your podcast app. If you're watching this on YouTube, check the description box down below. And lastly, you can head on over to freemanfurnishings.com/podcast and find this episode as well as all the past episodes, the show notes, the links, all the good stuff. When I am not interviewing fantastic makers and making podcast episodes, you can find me designing and making furniture and home decor at freemanfurnishings.com and at Freeman Furnishings across pretty much all the social media platforms. I am active pretty close to on the daily though on Instagram. So come on over and say hi at Freeman Furnishings. Again, make sure to follow along with the podcast at Crafting a Revolution on Instagram as well. And if you ever want to watch if you've been a listener of the episodes, but you want to watch the episodes, you can find those on my Freeman Furnishings channel over on YouTube. I have a quick link to it in the Crafting a Revolution link in bio on Instagram as well. Okay, it's the end of a week. Next week, we will be back with one brand new episode on Friday. And in the meantime, let's go craft a revolution.
She, her, them, they got something they wanna say. Solution for the toxic masculinity.